All right, this is episode 45 of the MVP podcast. Today we have Nolan Pascu, owner of Pascu Creative Group in Cleveland, Ohio. He also works for the NFL and has worked for Major League Baseball in the past as well. So we're going to dive deep into what makes Nolan Nolan, how he got here, and what his goals are with his business.
You know, like I don't remember the exact moment when it clicked in my head, like, oh, I can't dive bomb this hill doing pizza and French fries, or I'm gonna die and blow my knee out.
It's so hard to learn how to ski though, like going back to it. So it's like hard to teach somebody too, because you go on like a busy day, there's so many people around.
Oh my god,
riding the lift for the first couple times is an adventure in itself.
When you that's what makes or breaks somebody is once you go to get on that lift. Because I there's no way that you can prepare somebody for it. And I remember just telling Julia, I'm like, when it comes, be prepared. Like, it's going to hit you right in the back of like your knees, and you just lean back and fall into it. And like the first time we went, I think she lost like her first ski because I was like, shit, I forgot to tell her to keep her like tips up or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, just go to the top and just fall down and then scooch yourself like off the lift to get out of the way. Even when you get off the lift, it's tough if you're never have skied before.
Especially like if you snowboard.
Snowboarding is somebody told me this. I tried to snowboard for like a half a day once, and getting off the lift on a snowboard was 40 times harder than skiing.
Infinitely harder.
Yeah, because you're one foot's in, and then it's like, well, just push with your back foot, and I'm like, what, dude? Like now my foot's like turning in.
Especially if you're on like one of those 6-pack like quick express lifts like at Seven Springs. Those make it way worse because you're packed in with 6 people.
Right. I just vividly remember whenever I was going, I'm like, I'm the one going to the left. Like nobody go that way, or I will take you out. If I get off this lift, I'm going to the left, and I'm going to fall to the left, so I fall out of the way. But lifts are tough. But she got it towards like the end of the day.
That's good.
Yeah, she got like the little bit of like the turning, carving like back and forth, and just like getting the feel for like leaning, you know, back into like the hillside, so you can like start to like carve it out a little bit. That's just so hard to do, you know.
Yeah.
Or get to do at first.
Right. Yeah, it's just not a movement you're used to.
No.
Like, just push down with your foot and you're going to start turning. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm like trying to explain it. I'm like, just try to like think of like turning your like heel. I'm like, I'm not helping. I'm not helping this at all. Where do you go skiing at?
Seven Springs this year so far.
Sweet.
It's about 2 hours for me, and it's a lot better than like anything near me. I have, it's called Boston Mills Brandywine. It's like 20 minutes from my house, which is like super close, but they have 3 or 4 lifts and like, you know, I think maybe 10 runs. Like it's really small. So like I'll go there if I'm bored, and like, cause I have that Epic Pass. So like I'll go get a couple turns in there and then just go home, and I don't need to like worry about spending money there. But like if I actually want to go skiing, it's usually there or like Holiday Valley up in New York.
Yeah.
And then this year we're going out to Park City, which will be fun. We're doing that in February.
Where's that? Park City?
Utah.
Utah.
Yeah, so that'll be fun.
Have you been out west before?
I've been to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and the last time I was out there, I blew up my MCL like 2 hours into the day. So, you know, we're hoping that doesn't happen.
Shit, man.
But we'll see.
Oh, now, like, I heard out west skiing, if you go to, I heard Utah is better than Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado's so crowded.
Is that
so
what it is?
Commercialized.
Okay.
Like, you're, at least if you're buying a lift ticket there, you're going to be spending $250-$300 on a lift ticket immediately every day. And then all the food there is all commercialized because everybody that's just rich goes skiing in Colorado. But honestly, like, I haven't been to Wyoming yet, or haven't been to Utah yet, but Wyoming was like far and away the best skiing I've ever done.
Really?
Actually, I take that back. Japan was far and away the best, but in the States.
Yeah, that is like wicked cool. I mean, whenever Josh like sent me over Instagram, I'm like looking through and I saw the Japan thing. I'm like, no way.
Yeah, that
Pretty
was
cool project right there.
That was like definitely a bucket list thing.
Right.
I definitely want to touch on it in that because like the movie that like made me go buy a camera was actually filmed on the same ridge that we filmed our backcountry part for that documentary.
Wow.
Which was like, I didn't even realize it until I got home, and then I was looking at like some of the trees, and I think I was like rewatching the movie, and I was like, whoa, it's like the exact same place. Like, that's insane.
You search it up real quick and you fact check it. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, no
like
way.
I have my footage like next to it, and like one of the angles I had like matched up with where their camera was set up, and I was like, that's just so crazy to me.
Damn.
Yeah.
So you were filming a documentary out there?
We were filming a trailer for a documentary.
Okay.
So I went out. It was me and a PA. I say PA. It was really just my best friend and the only person I trusted to like carry camera stuff on a snowboard down a mountain.
Hard to do.
Yeah, it was. He has no camera experience. He owns a landscaping company, but I was like giving him a crash course on like, and he really was just doing like GoPro stuff. So like giving him a crash course on GoPros and like setting up lighting and stuff, and he did great. But yeah, we went out there, filmed basically like just a bunch of interviews. It was this travel agency that did it. They're an African American travel agency, and they all ski and snowboard, which like whenever you think of like ski and snowboarding, like it's predominantly just a white sport.
Right.
So like they kind of just fight that stereotype of like, only white people can ski and snowboard. So they take like, it's like 250, and they're all African American skiers and snowboarders, and they just go and shred for like 10 days in different places around the world, like each year.
That's awesome.
So yeah, they wanted to do some sort of story around it. They're pitching it to some studios. I'm not incredibly sure if there's like enough of a story there like for someone to pick it up, but in this age of like live streaming or just streaming in general, like Netflix, they'll pick up anything.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. And then like, see the idea and the proof of concept.
Exactly.
And follow through with it.
So the idea is in 2020, I think their goal is 2027 is going to be like the actual production year, to take like a bigger crew out there and actually like film an hour documentary, which would be fun.
That'd be intense.
You up again.
What kind of? I mean, that had to be pretty challenging from a production standpoint to be able to ski through like not small amounts of snow. If you go watch the video or some of the clips of the photos, This is legit skiing. Take us through some of those challenges.
Yeah. Honestly, the biggest challenge was just gear in the country, because we had to fly over, and for whatever reason, like the company didn't really want to pay for shipping stuff, and we also didn't really know where to send. Like if we wanted to box up gear and ship it, we didn't really know where to send it because addresses are really funky out there, and we were really stressed about like sending it to the wrong place because the first place we went was Kyoto, and like it's a massive city. Like their cities out there for whatever reason just span on forever.
Right.
Like it's just everybody kind of lives in the same area, and it's all like walkable cities. They're super dense, and then it's just nothing after the city. But that makes for really complicated addresses. Like they have like 2 or 3 kind of like numbered things, and I still don't know how they work, but we just didn't know how to get stuff places. So we really had 2 Pelicans and then like our check bag. We packed as much gear as we could in there, but we also had to pack, our skis, boots, and like all our outerwear, and then clothes for 10 days. So we had a lot of like just personal stuff. And then also like our carry-on was just Pelicans of camera gear. So we really had to work out of like 2 carry-on size Pelicans, which like we couldn't even get a tripod over there. Like it was really, really light packing. We had like 2 just like battery powered lights that we'd use. So that was probably production-wise the biggest challenge was just gear. I had skied with a camera because, like I'd said, like I bought my camera originally because of this ski movie that I saw, and like so the first year that I had a camera, that's all I really shot, and I never even thought about like using it for anything else. Which is funny because that trip to Japan was like the first time since then that I'd filmed skiing. But yeah, it was I don't know, it was a real challenge, but it went well. I mean, we had 1 camera there for 10 days, so like we got a good amount of footage. It's not as much as I would have liked to have had, but yeah, no, it went well overall.
It's pretty amazing. I'd love to do that someday.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine trying to put all of your tripod cameras, everything all into 2
Yeah, that was the part that was most
Pelicans.
challenging.
Yeah,
like
that's
we had,
ridiculous.
Yeah, and whenever we actually did our backcountry spot, we had backpacks on, but you also had to have all your Avi gear in the backpack. So I had a 24-70 that I took on the backcountry day, and then a 70 to 200 as well. And that backpack was like, I could barely close it. So like I was stressed the whole time, like not even super heavy, but like I was stressed if I fell, like if the bag wasn't all the way closed still. Because like I'd get to the bottom a couple times, like the bag's open, and I'm like, we're in like 1.5 feet, 2 feet of fresh. Like there's snow like spraying everywhere.
Right.
Like I'm just stressed about my gear, like just being wet whenever I get to the bottom. But
jeez,
how did the opportunity get pitched to you originally? Did you think this was like a scam on like come to Japan and film this? Like, you know, like right. That's so crazy. Like it's awesome. That's really cool.
It's a really weird approach, but yeah, so the guy that owns that business is actually the chief of the Akron Fire Department.
Oh, okay.
And my dad he works on the Akron Fire Department, and I guess like on his Facebook, he had just been like reposting like the stuff I was doing for my business. And this guy's name's Leon, great dude, but he called me and he's like, man, I love the videos that you do, and like I really want you to come out here. We can't pay you to go, but like you will cover the whole trip, and like you get to go to Japan and ski. And in my head, I'm like, that's a no-brainer. Like I'm going to Japan to ski. Like yeah, do you want me to pay? Like I'm there, like, regardless. But yeah, that's kind of how it came up. And then it was out of the picture for a long time. Like he called me about that maybe in September, and then they decided it wasn't in their budget, maybe around October. And then the middle of December, they called back and they were like, hey, we found some more money. Like we can do this.
Nice.
And the trip was at the end of January. So had like a little bit under a month to kind of plan everything for that. So I think that's probably the main reason we couldn't ship stuff over.
Right.
And we had no time to plan for like film permits or anything. Like it was all very like last minute. But
wow,
it all worked out. So
you mentioned you kind of first got into filmmaking from watching a ski movie when you were growing up. About what age did you really start to take it serious?
So I think that I bought my camera I bought it the COVID year, so 2020. I got it like January, February of that year. And then COVID hit and I had nothing to do. And I was just playing like Call of Duty and sleeping. Like I had nothing to do. I had my driver's license appointment scheduled actually for that Friday that everything shut down. And like they called and said I couldn't take my test.
Oh, that
and
sucks.
I'm like, so for the whole COVID lockdown, like I didn't have a driver's license, so I was just stuck at home. And I'm like just searching for things to do. So I bought like a cheap guitar on Amazon. I was trying to teach myself the guitar. And then I got bored with that because I really I can't sing, which is kind of half the battle whenever you have an acoustic guitar. But
that's exactly what I did during COVID too. Yeah. So is very subpar singing and average guitar. Yeah. You know, it's a crazy combo.
Makes for a really boring experience.
Exactly, dude. Yeah. Exactly.
So I got bored with that, and then I was just searching for things to do, and I was like, oh hey, I bought this camera for skiing, and I started just taking just the random amateur photos you see of a cornfield or something. Like there's nothing really going on in Ohio, so it's like, what do I take pictures of?
Cornfields,
especially during COVID. So I was doing landscapes and just random photos. And I really started to enjoy it and just kind of kept doing it. And then the football season rolled around, and I shot a couple games for my high school. I think mostly because that was the only way that I could watch the game, because I was a junior and they had the attendance so tight because of COVID, that they were really only letting the seniors at my high school go to the football games. I was like, well, if I go and say I'm taking pictures, I can go to the football games. So I showed up and was taking pictures, and that's where I really fell in love with it, where I was like, okay, because I knew for a long time that I wanted to work in sports, but the only sport that I really played and was good at least, was lacrosse. And after college with lacrosse, the ceiling is maybe making 40 grand a year, and that's the top 2-3 players, and I definitely wasn't top 2-3 players in the world. I would have gone to maybe a low D1 and rode the bench for 3 years and then started for a year. But to me, that just wasn't worth, another 4 years of my time invested into it. But I knew I wanted to work in sports, and I kind of found this love for it through photos. And I was like, okay, I can stay in sports through this. And as time went on, I realized you can really do any job in sports if you really want to. Like you can be an accountant in sports. But yeah, that's kind of where I found it and stuck with it.
That's sweet.
That's pretty epic. I love that there's so many stories from other creatives and stuff that I've talked to that start with GoPros. I personally started with a GoPro. My buddy we've had on, Mike Spinos, who's also an NFL SEC in Pittsburgh. He started with a GoPro. So it's pretty remarkable how many people that's like their first tool is really the GoPro. And I remember like growing up doing kind of what you do, just like messing around in the backyard with like this GoPro, filming sledding videos, like eventually skiing videos.
Right.
And then eventually turned into this. So it's pretty cool how that can be the spark for a lot of people.
Yeah, I had it was a Polaroid action camera whenever I was like 12. And it's like this long like cylinder, which looking back is such a weird concept for a camera. It looks like an old VHS recorder, honestly. But I had that for a long time, and I'd always like just record me just like skiing, like the POV, like GoPro stuff.
Nice.
And I don't even like, I'd go and like look at it and be amazed that like you could see stuff with the camera. It was like,
that's what
my standards were so incredibly low with it. I'm like, oh, look, you can see the logo of the ski resort on this guy's jacket. Like, whoa.
I was just going to say that. I think like with like GoPro and like holding something and doing it, like as you're doing it for the first time and you're like, wow, this is like real live footage that I just shot myself.
Like
and
this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then during COVID, my friend and I decided to take it more seriously than like the GoPro videos because we were watching so many of these ski films. What I didn't realize for a long time is how big like the ski film industry is. Like people like Teton Gravity Research, like Warren Miller back in like the 80s, 90s. Like these are massive studios that like obviously they're not making Hollywood money, but like they make a really cool product and they usually put out like a movie every year, which is just incredible pace if you're talking about that kind of production. But
yeah, that level of quality on like some of those older like ski films or guys just ripping hills. You're like, how the heck does a camera get there? Number one, how are you following that guy? Number two, and like keeping everything intact is just crazy.
Especially now with those POV drones. Some people or the FPVs, they get some crazy shots with that.
There was one just came out. It wasn't Shaun White. It was the skier that went down Everest. Did you guys see that?
Oh, I
for
did.
Red Bull?
I didn't see that, no.
And he went through like a crevice on Mount Everest and rips it down through. And there's a drone following him through like that crevice. And then there's a camera set up on like this crevice and he's skiing on this edge. And if he goes off by like 2 inches, bye, like you're gone.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm sure there's probably a rescue team and everything, but it's not going to be easy to get you out of there. And he's just like, rips it down through. Incredible.
Yeah, that video
absolutely
was
incredible.
insane.
Yeah. Then I think it was like a month later, Shaun White comes out and does like a backflip off of like Everest or something nuts.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's insane. So take us through where the journey led you after kind of getting started during COVID and forming your business.
Yeah. So after I was shooting high school for a couple of years, I ended up going to the University of Akron as a student. It's interesting. I've never met anybody that did this, but I took an official visit for creative to Akron. I don't know if you guys know who Landon Persinger is. He's the creative director at Memphis now, but at the time he was working full-time at Akron, basically trying to build a creative team from scratch there. And so he had me and then David Vahey there for a game. I think he's out in LA now. I'm not positive. But he had us out for a game and we did like photos there. He took us like a tour around campus, like basically treated us like we were like football recruits, but we were there for creative.
That's insane.
You know, like
Didn't
they
know
get
they
like the
did that.
graphics and everything. Like I've never heard of anybody else doing this.
Did they pull up in a Lamborghini, drive you around?
Yeah, they
like
offered
Nick
an
Saban?
NIL contract. It's great.
That's wild.
Yeah, so we shoot the game, and then I go back to like my high school sports for the rest of the year, and then I went to Akron. Basically, it was just a student employee position with their athletic department, and by the time I was there, Landon took that job in Memphis. It was me, one of my best friends from high school, and then some other guy that went to our high school that graduated a couple years ahead of us. and we were the only creatives for the whole athletic department. We were just 3 student employees. So we were all ripping like 40, 50, 60-hour weeks, getting paid for like 20 hours, just grinding it out for this athletic department. And then it eventually got to the point, it was the first year of a new head coach, and he came from a bigger school, Joe Moorhead. So he was used to like Penn State creative, Oregon creative. He was the head coach at Mississippi State, so used to really big programs. And then he went from, probably having 7 or 8 people just in football video for their creative department down to 3 for an entire athletic department. So his demands, especially off the rip, were like really high, and his standards were really high. And we're like, dude, we're students using our own gear that we bought. Like we don't have the budget, the time, like the skill, honestly, because we're all students, and, at the time we weren't professionals. So we're trying to figure it out. And my 2 friends ended up actually quitting because he just kept putting so much pressure on it. And I was at the point where we were close enough to the end of football season, and our Akron's basketball team is really good. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'll just stick it out with football and then go work for basketball in the winter, and all will be well. What I didn't account for is after the football season, the athletics department wanted me to do all of the sports, not just basketball.
And you were the only one there?
So then at the time, I was the only person there that was doing like photo, video, and graphics, which not really graphics because I cannot do graphic design at all.
That's a lot of time too, especially if you're doing all of the sports.
No, that too, and like graphic design I'd never done, and I'm like trying to figure out how to use Photoshop, and like it just wasn't working. So I was like, look, I'll do your photos and your videos, but I'm good after that. So yeah, it was a lot of work that spring, and it really, I was never really a big believer in burnout. Like I was like, just take some time and then focus back in, but I really got burnt out, and I really started to hate what I was doing. And then I was just kind of at this low point, and then I got offered the MLB LCC job. And that kind of, it gave not hope, because like obviously I knew everything was going to work out okay. But like it gave me hope that like, okay, there's kind of a light at the end of this tunnel. Like I'm not just going to be getting paid $10 an hour for the rest of my life. Like there's kind of an out. So at that point, I knew I had a summer of work part-time with the MLB, and then the next fall I had with the NFL. So I knew I had, the next 6 months of at least part-time work covered. And I kind of made the decision like, hey, let's kind of take this jump and see if I can do this full time. So quit my job at Akron, and then went to all my professors and was like, and the opening weekend for MLB actually lined up with my finals. Like my first day of work there was the day all of my finals were for my spring semester. So I go to all my professors. I'm like, hey, can I take this, exam this morning, a week early, whatever? Like, I'm just not going to miss my first day of work for like somewhere at the time I thought might be somewhere I could be for my whole career.
Right.
Like, I don't want to miss that. So yeah, I went to them and I was like, hey, can I take the exams early? And shockingly, none of them like were willing to budge on it. And I'm like, at the time, it really frustrated me. Yeah. Looking back, like sometimes you really just need that push out of the nest from God, like to be able to go do something that you're being called to. And I was like trying to stay in school like as much as possible. And I was like turning down work to stay in school. And I think that was kind of just like my push out of the nest, like, hey, you got to go do this.
Right.
So because of that, now I have a 1.3 college GPA, but it all went well. So then I did that MLB job through the summer and was never expecting to work with Akron again. And then they called me back about the beginning of July. One of the ADs called me and he said, like, hey, we didn't realize how much you were actually doing here, because at least the higher ups, what they saw is someone was working 20 hours a week on this stuff. They didn't see all the time that I wasn't allowed to clock because I was a student.
Right.
So they were like, we didn't realize how much you were doing. What's your freelance rate? And I took a very bold step and I said, it's not just me. I actually have this business model that we're doing with this live content. So my team's rate is XYZ. Mm-hmm. And honestly, at the time, I didn't really have a rate in my head. I was not prepared for that at all. Didn't have a team. Said I did. And was like, hey, this is what we do now. So, you can hire our team or, it is what it is.
Yeah,
we're good. Which looking back was like incredibly way too bold of me. I should have just, been happy for the freelance work because it was really my first actual client. Through that summer, I was just kind of doing like those $250, $300 jobs that you have to do to kind of get started. And it's, it's hard work to do that. And to kind of have the ability to have like a standing freelance gig, I should have just been happy to take.
Right.
But
I think there was a lot of other things at play too. I would probably have done the exact same thing in this situation if a professor didn't let me take a finals early.
Right. And I had like this ill will towards Akron too, where I
Right.
was like, look, if we're not going to do this like ideal, we're not going to do it at all.
Right.
So, but they kind of shockingly, they were like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And I was like, okay, let me go find some people. So I reached out to a bunch of the people that I was close with in the industry. And we kind of put together a little team, covered all their football games, their basketball games. All the posts that we did performed really well. And they kind of had us back since then.
Nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to shoot your shot. And that was a great instance of that. And it worked out. And it's led you down to even bigger clients and more work now. So
Right. Yeah.
it's pretty epic.
So are you still a student? Is that what?
I'm not, no.
Okay.
So
How old are you too? We should clarify that.
I turned 21 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Nice. Well,
so
happy
he's very
late
young.
birthday, man. Yeah.
You started working for the NFL at 18, correct?
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So
Not many people can say that.
Yeah, I didn't realize it at first, but at the time that I was hired, I was actually the youngest person to be hired by the NFL into a senior position, which is definitely a resume piece.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Throw that thing right at the top.
Right, yeah.
Not only just that, but then you also work for Major League Baseball around the same time, and you're basically at the same time, right?
Yeah. So I started working with the NFL the October of 22.
Okay.
And then it was the summer of 23 I worked for MLB. So kind of the year after.
Okay, yeah. So that's literally the same story as me, basically. I started October 22.
Okay.
And then I met you a couple weeks later
Yeah.
because you came to Pittsburgh for that game. We needed an extra
Yeah, that
person.
Saints game.
That was like my third week, and it was your third week or
Yep.
something.
That's funny.
And then we both started working for MLB the following spring. So it
Yeah.
was like kind of wild how it all transpired.
There you go. How did the NFL approach you? Because I'm always curious to hear the story. Mikey's story was different from Josh's,
Okay.
but like, how did the
I've never
opportunity
asked
come?
you about how you got asked, so I'm interested to hear how you got approached by
Mm-hmm.
it. But they, Cody DM'd me on Twitter. I was in my dorm, and I know you had that on your question list. Like, was the NFL your end goal? And to be honest, like, it wasn't even on my radar whenever they reached out because I thought I was a lot further away from it than I was. I was just posting all the videos I did for Akron on my Twitter, and then one day I was in my dorm and I got a DM from a Twitter account that was just someone's personal account. It said, hey, we have an event on Sunday in Cleveland. Would you be available to help out to shoot video for it? Didn't say it was an NFL game, didn't say it had anything to do with the Browns or, anything. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'm good with it. And he's like, cool, can you hop on this quick call like tomorrow if you're free to just go over what the shoot will be? And that quick call like was my interview for the NFL. Like it was almost like this surprise thing.
Yeah, they were doing it discreetly.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And I wasn't expecting it at all because it was like week 6 of the NFL. Like I figured, and all the LCC applications that I'd seen were like in February. Like it was a long time gone.
Right.
So, yeah, he just reached out like that, and a couple weeks later, I was on the field for the Patriots game.
While you were like interviewing, were you connecting the dots going, I think this is for the Browns?
Well, the first like, oh shit moment was the Zoom link was zoom.nfl.com. And I was like that's, I usually just see zoom.com. Like, that's different. So, and then
Mr.
I hop
Goodell
on
gonna
there
be
and
on this.
they kind of like spill the beans right away.
Yeah.
Like what it is. And I honestly, I couldn't tell you why they weren't just straight up about it.
That's a good point.
I don't know.
That's
I feel like it's a tactic. It's a test sometimes. Because
Right.
like I feel like they want to get people that are willing to like put in the work, but not realize that it's for this.
Right.
Because you might get bad apples that way. But there's also other ways where it's very transparent. So it's just kind of hit or miss, I feel like.
So how did they reach out to you?
So mine was similar but different. So I was aware of the program because I started following like Mikey and Alex around Pittsburgh. And so I kind of knew it from that. And then I started following like other LCCs from around the U.S. And occasionally they'd post on their stories like, hey, we're hiring in these cities. And occasionally Pittsburgh would be on there and they'd be like, DM this account. So that was Kim, our boss now's account. So I'd like send stuff from Westminster over here. Never would hear anything. I applied to the job online. So I think I started applying to this probably like 2020-ish.
Okay.
When I was like starting to get close to graduating. So I didn't hear anything that first year. 2021 comes around. I do it again. Don't hear anything. 2022 comes around. Again, like I send like fresh stuff to Kim, nothing, but she's also not even reading it. So it's like, I'm like, whatever. It's not going to work out. And then like you, I thought it was over because the season started. It's like the end of September already. And I randomly get a DM from Kim one night and I'm like laying there in bed and it's like, hey, do you have time for an interview on Monday or something? And I'm like, holy shit. Like, so I knew it was the NFL at that point. But like you, I didn't realize going into the meeting, like how many people would be on it. I thought it'd just be like me and Kim. But I get on there, there's like 6 people. Yeah. It's basically like the whole LCC management team at the time. So they go on there and I'm like, man, I hope they don't like grill me on stuff that I don't know about. Like,
ask you situational questions.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they were relatively easy questions.
It wasn't really like a hard interview.
But there were a couple where it was like, how would you react in like a certain situation around a celebrity or something was one. And then there was like, how do you use, because at the time I was doing like high school football as well. It was like, how do you use your business to like help a football? It was like random questions like that were like relatively simple to answer. Yeah, I went on the interview, got the gig. A week later, was filming the Saints versus Steelers game. That was my first one. So.
Oh, that was your first game?
Yeah. Oh, that must have been my first one actually. That was the one you were at, right? That was my first one then.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Now after that happens with the initial interview process, do they tell you anything at all? What to do or like what to expect, or is it just kind of show up at the gate and get us some good stuff?
In my experience, and you probably have a different one, it was kind of just like show up here and meet up with these other 2 LCCs who were Mikey and Alex at the time, and they'll kind of guide you through what to do. But if they weren't there, I don't know if I would have any idea what to do.
No, that was kind of exactly my experience. They sent the recording of their like preseason training video, but like it doesn't really explain anything about the process. It's more so all the rules you have to dance around, since we're like league employees for that.
Right. Like
really strict on the anti-gambling, all that kind of stuff. So I was expecting like the training to be more like, what do you actually do? But I guess the expectation there is like, if you get hired by the NFL, like you're supposed to know exactly what to do. Like,
you know the shots and angles that you want.
Yeah. As far as filming, they had like I remember they had like a graphic on their training, like website thing. That was like basically like places to like stay depending on where the ball was. But like it was kind of where you'd be regardless.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like the most challenging part too, honestly, at least in my experience, is like those first couple games, getting an idea for like the security, where you can go, where you can't go, because you don't want to be like messing stuff up. And it is very intense at times where like they're pretty strict about like going on the field, not going on the field, going down this hallway but not the other hallway. So that was the biggest like comfort level thing, was like those first few games you just have to like get comfortable with like what you're doing before you can really start to take it in, I feel like.
Yeah.
Definitely.
The crowd's going nuts.
Yeah.
Steelers atmosphere. Grow up watching them since you were a kid.
That too. Yeah. That's a big part.
You're like, oh man, there's all kinds of emotions going on right now. I'm not shooting high school football anymore. Let's do this thing.
Yeah. No, I don't know. The first couple games definitely felt surreal. And the second game that I worked for them was the Monday Night Football on Halloween, Browns-Bengals, which was like, at least for that season, it was a really big game because both of the teams were having good seasons leading up to that.
Yeah.
So it was really like, it was just this really big ticket game. You know, Miles is coming in his Halloween costume. Like Joe Burrow's there in a Halloween costume. Like all the eyes are really on this game. And I, you know, especially like pregame, I'm on the field like, oh wow, that's Myles Garrett.
He's towering me. The dude's a monster.
Right.
Has there ever been a moment when you've been like truly starstruck since being there?
Not necessarily. Maybe the first game, maybe like the arrival tunnel, just because it's like, oh, this is real. But honestly, like once we got on the field that first day, like it was pretty much, pretty smooth sailing as far as freaking out goes.
Yeah, get what I need to get.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like whenever you're working, you don't really have time to like think about who it is. Like we did the Browns Chiefs games. That was the first time the Chiefs came to Cleveland since I've been there. And like the Mahomes arrival shot is always like a big deal for them. And I was on a gimbal like and got like kind of right in front of him and like walked with him for a while. And then after I like get done with that, like I think to myself like, oh, that's like Patrick Mahomes. Like that's the guy that all the announcers like go crazy over.
Yep. Yeah, that's Collinsworth's second or third son, right?
Right.
The memes of him crack me up.
It's so funny. I love it.
Mahomes might be the best quarterback since Jesus Christ.
Hey, here's a guy.
Yeah, now here's a guy here that just knows football. You're like, dude, what? He is so good though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's seeing him in person too. It's just like you do get kind of starstruck a little bit.
Yeah,
just because they've been so relevant the last couple of years.
Right.
But
yeah, I didn't realize how good at football he really was until I saw him like as close as I was in person playing
live, and you're like, how the hell did you even see that guy?
Right. It's either that or like the Browns pass rush has been their strength for the last maybe 5 years since Myles Garrett has been drafted. Really, they've had guys like Myles obviously, and then Zadarius Smith has been there for the last couple of years, and guys like Ogbo Okoronkwo, like their pass rush is really really good.
Right.
And to see like that pass rush just get pressure and they get to Mahomes and it just doesn't phase him at all, and he's still finding a way to get the ball out. Yeah. Whereas most quarterbacks like will turn and like kind of try to run out of it or anything. Like he just found a way to get the ball out, and it's like the Browns obviously are the team I watch the most because I'm working their games. And no quarterback really escapes that. Like Joe Burrow, like his most sacks are against the Browns. Like the most times he's been sacked by, I think like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Like
dude takes a beating.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow.
he does.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, he is a freak.
I'm curious. So since school's kind of over at this point and you're well underway with the business, are there different ways that you try to reinvest in yourself and your business as far as like education or training, anything of that nature?
I'd say gear is the biggest reinvestment at this point. I've done a couple master classes and kind of get mixed results from them. It just kind of depends. The one that I got the most out of was probably Gordon Lie's class. And it's more focused around like scaling your business and advertising. So like lead gen type stuff, which I got a lot more out of than, like a course that's going to explain how to get shots, I guess. Because I did a couple of those and it's focused like more on the actual shooting side, and it's, different things definitely work for different people. Yeah. So I didn't get a ton out of those.
Yeah, I've always been on the camp of like, there's no right or wrong way really to do this stuff because it's basically art at the end of the day. Sure, there's different ways you can like, it's like widely accepted maybe with like lighting or like certain ways of using cameras, but I've always just done whatever I wanted. Yeah. Whatever I think is cool,
whatever looks good.
But yeah, it's an interesting topic for sure, and people have opinions on it. But like what me and Alex talk a lot of, YouTube there's so much free knowledge out there.
I honestly like I never took a proper like digital media class really ever. I had a digital media class in high school, but I really just used it as time to edit my high school football team's like hype video for the next week. And we didn't really do like a whole lot of actual learning there. And then I was a photo major my first semester at Akron, which you'd think would, kind of lend itself to that, but it's in their School of Art. So the first semester, my classes were a foundations class in drawing, 2D design, and sculpting. So like my 3 classes were really just what you think of like a high school art class.
Right.
And A, I wasn't getting anything out of it. B, everybody else in the class, that's what they did was art. And I'm like, I take pictures. Like, I can't draw. Like, I don't know what you expect me to do.
This
so,
isn't
like,
my art form here.
Yeah.
Like, give
so
me out.
like, yeah, like the sculpting class especially.
Yeah.
Like, the stuff I made is just
sometimes
terrible.
with colleges, man, they build a curriculum around what they think that you need for it all.
Right.
And I mean, sometimes it's helpful, but at the end of the day, like, wasting money in the class that you don't want to be in. You want to do what you want to do. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's
And
tough.
like the degree would have been a Bachelor of Fine Arts. So like I get that, like, obviously if you're gonna have a degree in art, like you
What I
should be
have to
able to
do.
do all that.
Right.
But for me it just didn't make any sense at all. So I ended up going to business administration the next semester,
There you go.
which
Join
just
the-
a lot more all around,
Yeah.
knowledge.
Join the dark side, me and Josh.
Facts, business, the
There we
business
go.
life.
Right.
How would you describe what your business, Pascu Creative Group, focuses on? Like, who are your ideal clients at this time, and how has that changed maybe from when you started?
I don't know that it's really changed since I've started. But I also don't know if I've really like achieved my ideal client yet. So I think that that's somewhere, we just finished our first full year of actually being in business, which
Congrats.
yeah, thank you.
That's
It
awesome.
went much better than I expected it to be honest with you. Yeah, our ideal client is definitely in the sports world, and it's sports organizations specifically. So like that Cage Thunder MMA event that you went to, that was kind of like
It's pretty sweet.
it was.
We got to talk about that.
Yeah. It was kind of the first step to like that, and then we also did Tennis in the Land. They're kind of our first steps towards what we actually want to be working with. They're not obviously as large of clients as we'd like. But whenever you're starting kind of from scratch, you're not going to be working, with the PGA Tour year one. It's just not going to be a thing.
I feel like half the battle is just getting that footage too, like
Yeah.
under your belt, like and seeing that, oh, this is sick. Like they're
Right.
good at what they do.
Yeah. So that's a big part. But yeah, ideally working with like sports organizations that aren't operating as a year round kind of ordeal. So like football teams, they kind of have content that needs to be made every single month of the year. So it makes sense for them to hire someone full time. The whole point of our business is really to give the benefit of a full-time creative staff in a package that you don't need to pay a salary for. So for example, like if you're a golf tournament, you have a couple events a year maybe. So you bring on a creative staff for those few events and then work with them kind of sporadically through the year, like for promos or whatever. You don't need someone on salary for that. You can just outsource to a third party. And that's kind of where we're finding success is like working with people like Cage Thunder where they do 4 events a year. They have a kind of constant need for like promo material, but they really need a lot of staff for their actual events to make it happen. People like Tennis in the Land, they have 1 tournament a year, but it's a week straight of just, tennis match after tennis match where they need to be ripping posts because they're on the Women's Pro Tour.
Right.
So that's kind of been where we find like our most success. And like we still work with Akron as like their kind of creative internal video staff. But I don't expect that to be a thing for maybe more than the next 2-3 years. Just because like college football, almost everybody has their own staff internal. Akron might be actually the only exception in the country. So it's really,
Which is
it's
kind of
not
cool for you.
Yeah, no, it is really cool to be able to be like the internal staff for like this athletics department, but it's not really a matter of if they hire internally, it's just when.
Yeah.
So
I think basketball and football and baseball sometimes, like you were saying, like the people that are on there as full-time salaried employees, just as somebody that's outside the industry, it could be like flooded. Like you turn on ESPN and it's either baseball, football, basketball. When you get something else, and I think that's kind of like unique in a sense too, where you can upload that onto an Instagram or a social platform, like you were saying, like the live events or like the live recordings. I feel like those probably get more traction because people see it and it's not something that they see as much. You know, like I don't see, unless you're like a big UFC guy. I mean, UFC is getting a lot more traction. I mean, MMA itself is getting a lot more traction, but getting like cool films of tennis, MMA fighting, and having that, I think it's more unique. It's not like saturated like a basketball.
And we
football,
see that with
you know?
our results for sure. So like Tennis in the Land, we really only did live content for the last 2 days of it. But I think we generated over 600,000 views to this account that has like 15,000 followers.
That's huge.
For that Cage Thunder event that you just helped out with, in the first, I haven't checked it since, but in the first 24 hours, we did over 100K views and they have 2,500 followers on the account. Like, people really like to see our style of content. And it's growing those people, you know, their audience really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still believe that market is still relatively untapped, especially at the level of like high school sports, Division III, Division II athletics. And then also just like different tentpole events for like marathons, golf tournaments, like you said, different tournaments, youth tournaments. There's so many like youth tournaments for different sports that are huge. Like so many people come into town and they have all these games, but they don't do any content for it. And it's like, I think people are starting to see the value in that. And I think that's where a company like you can really excel, because parents and kids, ultimately, it's the kids that kind of pull the strings, I feel. They want cool stuff to be able to put on Instagram, put on TikTok, use for recruiting purposes, NIL purposes. So it's starting to grow. And I also think the live stream market is kind of untapped, especially for youth sports, because it's still really like huddle cams for a lot of it for live streams, which work. But it's not to the level which some of these newer companies that are doing that tap into like Twitch and like stuff like that, where you can really get some unique stuff. So definitely. I feel like you're positioned pretty well right now.
Yeah, I'm excited for it because, I mean, even if you look back just a couple of years, the only business that was really kind of doing this sort of thing was Let It Fly Media. Yeah. And since then, they've been acquired by a really massive company. And now, you know, they do every massive event, I feel like, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a few more, like, especially in the music scene. I think music festivals have been quick to jump on that kind of thing, where, you know, like the live streaming and the social side. Like, for example, I was out at Summer Smash this year, and their internal staff, I think they had like 15 people doing their socials, which obviously, like, Cole Bennett started making music videos. So, like, he's going to be kind of on the forefront as far as the content goes. But, you know, people like Rolling Loud is doing the exact same thing now. They have a company called Respective that does really, really high quality work for their music festival, Lollapalooza, kind of the same deal. Like, they all have really invested in this creative, and it's taken them from just being a music festival into being like a really massive national brand.
Yeah, it's like an event that it's like you got to come and do it.
Yeah.
And do you, with like the live stream, do they do that more as like an advertising, or do they try to like monetize on like even their live streams too as well that they record?
At least the ones I've seen have been live streams that are kind of functioning like TV, but it's on the internet, or it's streaming to TV sometimes in those cases. But they'll sell ad space as well for the streams. So you could potentially then have, so they're set up all differently, but I've seen some companies that will then actually give a percentage of the ads back to the organization that they're covering. So if it's a sports organization, the contract might be they get 25% of the ad revenue from the live stream. And so then you can have different ways that it pays for itself, or you even make money off of it. If you're getting viewership, that helps as well. But
that makes me like think of like, remember like the Live Aid concerts that they made back in the 80s, and there's like millions of people streaming in, donating, calling in. I mean, I feel like that's kind of getting to that point again with some of those festivals and stuff. I mean, they're already massive to begin with,
just like a little example, I just met with a company, JRM Video from Pittsburgh, that we worked with for Steelers youth football this fall, and they streamed every high school game we went to for like 13 weeks on the internet and on TV. And then they were averaging like 14 or 15,000 views per viewer, for 18 or 14,000 viewers per game. And then they had some that capped out at like 24 or 25,000, which is like pretty good numbers for high school football.
That's actually way more than I thought it
That's what
been.
I was surprised with that. So those are really strong numbers for like a Friday night high school game. And so it's kind of showing that market is there.
I think too, so many times with local games, for whatever reason, dude, it is almost impossible to find the link to find
Yes.
the games on the internet.
Or there's like spam links where it's like
Exactly.
put in your bank info.
Right.
you get buried. Like you get absolutely buried. I don't know. Whoever figures out how to create a high school sports link that is easy, you go in, you click it, and maybe there's some advertisements through the game and you don't have to put any info in.
Yeah.
I think you got killer business.
Yeah, actually, I talked to someone. He does broadcast work for Guardians games. It's been a couple of years, so I should check back in with him. But he was starting like a broadcast channel for high school sports that would be basically like function through an app, where it'd be either like a monthly membership or even like pay-per-view, like to watch like high school sports.
Yeah.
Which is basically that exact kind of model.
Right. Because I feel like so many newspaper outlets try to do it, but it just seems so behind the times. Like they need a agency or like something like you guys do to just come in and just be like, let us handle this and we could run it through our website.
I mean, it's still largely,
you know,
which we can explore in further episodes maybe, but it's just like people that don't get it kind of just get in the way. It's kind of corruption at the end of the day.
Right.
I hate to say it.
They don't want to lose the power of
there's all sorts of deals in place that have been in place, or, you know, my buddy does this and we're sticking with it, or that's a waste of money. So it's getting better, and it's going to continue to get better as people move on. But it's definitely out there. But I want to make sure we touch on Cage Thunder some more, because that was pretty intense. That was pretty sweet last week.
That was fun.
What was it? They just go in, is it Ohio? They have events all around Ohio or all around the country?
MMA so fights. Cage Thunder is the largest MMA organization in Ohio. So they're commissioned by, I forget what the federation's called, but it might be like Ohio Fighting Federation or whatever it is. But they're commissioned to sanction professional fights. So they paid the fighters for a professional fight. So if these guys end up going to the UFC, their record will be like the record that they hold from Cage Thunder. Cool. So it's obviously not the same level as UFC, but it's technically like the same kind of, you know.
Still matters. Yeah, your fight record. Yeah.
Yeah. So they do that. They do 4 events a year, and then 4 of the events like what we did a year. And then they have a few more that they call like their next gen fights that are just all amateur fights. So the first half of the slate, at least on Saturday, was their amateur fights, and then they had, I think, 4 or 5 professional sanctioned fights, which is fun. It's a lot more competitive, I think, than a lot of people would give it credit for, because whenever you think of really any like fighting organization that's not like World Boxing or UFC, like I feel like you just think it's gonna be some dude in a Macho Libre costume, like coming out, you know, super hairy chest, like a ton of body fat, like, you know, body slamming off a table or something. Like you don't take it seriously, I think. But all the fighters there definitely do take it seriously. We did a few interviews with a few fighters from a gym before the fights, and they were all in a 3-month camp the exact same way they do the UFC. You know, every day they have a fighting practice, every day they're lifting, every day they're getting treatment. And I have a lot of respect for it, because that's a lot of times on top of having a day job, because, you know, they're still trying to get to the point where they can make an actual living off of it. You know, if the pros win their fight, I think their prize is maybe around $4,000. So if you win all 4 of your fights a year, you make an extra $16,000, but you're probably spending all of that on your training, treatment, nutrition, all that.
Oh, easily.
If not more.
Right.
You know, so I have a ton of respect for these guys, and they really do care about what they're doing, which is, I think, even for myself, like, I didn't really expect that. Like, I thought it would be a lot more of a gimmick than it is. Mm-hmm. As far as covering it, it moves way faster than I think any of us planned on. Since I know Josh and I, at least, we're used to media timeouts. Like, at the college level, at the pro level, you're going to get a media timeout often. You know, whether it's a change of possession, a touchdown, anything, you're going to kind of have a chance to breathe and like move and set up, send stuff off, whatever. But since they do a pay-per-view for that event, but they don't do commercials for this pay-per-view event. So it's really like straight into the next fight, one after another. So since we're doing the live content model where we're posting the fight that just happened, you know, we're honestly like running to drop off the card, running back to the next like walkout to make sure we cover it. And honestly, I think that was probably an oversight on my end. I think we just needed to staff it heavier, maybe bring a couple card runners, bring someone that's just going to be editing the entire time and someone that can focus on kind of being like ringside and all the walking shots and that stuff. But yeah, it moves really quick. But it's really dope event, honestly.
It was really intense. That was my first like live like fighting type event that I've both watched and or worked. So it was cool just seeing like you said how serious it is. And there was like a decent crowd for it too. Like a cool little, what was that? The Canton Civic Center.
Yeah.
So it was like an older like arena, but they filled it up pretty good and had a legit stage and legit lights and everything. So it was a cool experience, and it was a cool athletic sport to add to my portfolio that I haven't had yet. So
it's
cool.
Those fighters too, I feel like even when you watch the UFC and you see the prelim fights, those fights are, those guys are going so hard because that's their chance to make it up. And I feel like that's why those guys, even at that level too, a lot of people do think that this is just going to be like some backyard fight, you know? And like those guys they're trying their hardest to be seen or have a great record, and so the fights are legit and like you're pouring your heart out there.
Right.
Like, like a lot of those guys like aren't afraid to get messed up in the process, man. It's intense.
Yeah. And I will say like probably the biggest difference is like strike force. Like the UFC, like you see a lot more cuts, like blood, all that. Just because, the guys at that level, they're just different. But it's still a really good product.
Yeah. So are you guys booked with them then? So they have 4 events through the 4.
Yeah, so we'll be doing at least their February event, I know for sure. They really enjoyed what we did, and again, like it performed really well. So they really ate it up, and it's good people that run the organization. And I think that they're ready. They've been doing it for about 3 years now. And I think they're ready to like really grow it.
Yeah.
So they're in a good spot to really invest kind of in that content.
Nice. They have anybody in their fighting organization that went to the UFC?
No. I don't think so, actually.
It's only 3 years old though too.
Yeah.
So
they have a lot of guys from Stipe's gym, Strong Style, MMA in Strongsville.
Yeah.
They have a lot of guys that fight in Cage Thunder that go to the same gym as Stipe Miocic, though.
Nice.
So
they is that new? Is that gym newer in Strongsville?
I think it's been around.
Okay.
Yeah.
They've been opening more up around Pittsburgh. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
So actually, crazy enough story. Me and Julia were downtown in Market Square, like just eating and watching like this live band. Next thing you know, I'm just like, we're sitting there. This little guy comes walking by, like the size of like up to my chest. And I'm only 6 foot tall. Like, and this guy is short. And he's there with this girl that's like towering him and high heels, everything, walking by. I'm looking at him. He's like all inked up, like hands, everything, neck's tatted. And then I look at him, and then he has a tattoo of a sword like over his eye. I'm looking at Julia, and Julia knows UFC fighters. I'm like, that's Cody Garbrandt, 100%. That's him. And I'm like, Julia's like, are you sure? I'm like, it has to be. Like, who has that tattoo like that? And like, he had hair over and everything like that. His ears were all fucked up, and like, that has to be him for sure. We go into the hotel room that we were down there because I was down there for work, and there was like a poster of him, and it's like Cody Garbrandt opening up this gym down in Pittsburgh. And I'm like, shit, I should have like went up and said what's up or tried to take a picture with him or something goofy. But yeah, little dude, man. But wow, like he would kill me. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, just the cardio you probably need to be able to pull that off. Like fighting is like a whole nother ball game than just like running around or anything like that.
Yeah. Joe Rogan's
I think there was a couple that maybe it was like their first fight or two that struggled probably in that sense with the cardio, but stuff to work to. Probably you just have to do it to get better.
You just get so
your
much
ass kicked
adrenaline.
Basically, and I couldn't imagine the adrenaline and
especially like being in front. I think they sold 2,500 tickets to that.
Yeah,
damn.
Like
you're in
especially
front of
being
your
in front of
family.
those people, like your family, your friends, like all these people that you don't know.
Right. That's
a lot of pressure.
It's a crazy sport. It's like modern day gladiators, but instead of like dying, hopefully you don't die, but it's that or you get knocked out tapped out. You don't want that to happen.
No.
No, they had a guy go out on a stretcher. I don't.
Yeah, there
really
was
know
one
what
guy
happened.
that
Oh,
the fight
wow.
was like
I don't know
over,
what happened. Yeah.
and something happened where they had to take him out on a stretcher. I didn't really get to see, but I saw the
don't know.
aftermath. So
It's always
it's
scary.
intense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm shocked it doesn't happen more in the UFC.
I'm sure it probably happens more frequently than we realize.
Yeah, behind the
especially at like
scenes.
the lower levels. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Like at the pro level, it's pretty crazy. It doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. How do you feel about the slap boxing sport?
I don't know. I mean, it's entertaining, but it's also just kind of crazy.
Yeah.
They said it's like worse than like UFC and stuff as far
I
as
feel
like
like head
for your
damage has to be crazy.
health and stuff, because it's just like direct
just
hits to the head
repeated.
every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Point
Unguarded,
blank,
just
unguarded.
yeah.
I just don't see that. Like, you just have to be mentally unstable to do that.
You got to be
Just
crazy to do
repeatedly.
any of that stuff, I feel like.
Yeah.
To an
Yeah.
extent.
There's got to be a screw loose.
But one of our other previous guests, Peter's Pasta, he's done he went to the slap boxing, or I think it was called Power Slap.
Power
was
slap.
the one he went
yes,
to.
Power slap. No,
which
that's
is
the league.
by somebody.
I think
Dana.
the UFC,
Dana
it's
White,
UFC.
I
Yeah, I
think,
think
is
Dana
involved
might
in
do
that.
it.
So he went to that during the Super Bowl week last year in Vegas, and he said it was like the coolest thing he's ever been to.
Live?
And live.
He said
and
that
the
was the
fact
best.
that like all of these people were. I mean, there's so many high rollers there. I mean,
Yeah.
every streamer, every like big person at the time was there for the Super Bowl, so they also all got invited to this. And so he had some cool stories from that. Maybe we'll dive into if we have him on. But
Yeah, I can't. I just couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
doing it. That's for
It'd
sure.
be, I don't know. I always say like, even just to do your own business, like what you guys are doing with this, or like to fight professionally, whatever it might be, like you got to be this mix of like passionate, excited, and like a little bit crazy to be able to do it.
That's it.
And it's just, I don't know, that I feel like is a different level. But I had a short conversation with Cole Bennett whenever he was in Cleveland. And one of like the things he kind of kept repeating like through this conversation is like, either you're passionate, crazy, and excited about what you're doing, or you think you know what you're doing. And like if he basically said like if you're not building the plane like as you fly it, like you're probably missing out on a lot of opportunity. Which you can see like with what he does with lyrical.
Incredible.
It's crazy. I mean, yeah, like I feel like it's just something new every year with him. But it definitely rings true, especially like with what you guys are doing with the podcast, with, you know, kind of getting into like the live content, live streaming, like all that kind of thing where nobody knows the direction it's going to go. Like you kind of don't have a choice other than to do it that way.
Yeah. Right.
do it live.
Live.
That's honestly how it
Yeah.
feels, though. You know, when you're just starting a business, you never really feel like you know exactly what's going on, or if you're doing it right. It's just like
Right.
you're just like, I'm gonna do this, and we're gonna see what happens.
Yeah.
But,
Speaking of inspirations, you brought up Cole Bennett. Is he number one? Do you have anybody else that you look towards where you're like, man, his stuff is dope?
He's up there. Obviously, like I don't do a ton of music, so it's hard for me to
right.
really say like that he's a massive inspiration there. As far as his creative process and just kind of his thought process, I have a ton of respect, and he really inspires me in that way. But as far as like sports specifically go, I texted Carter Franklin, who I work NFL LCC with now. I texted him in like 2020 over Instagram, and I was like, just something stupid, like can't wait to be like shooting like kind of like the same thing that you are. And at the time he was, I think it was maybe his first or second year with the NFL. And then like, I think that was really the only thing he was doing. He was working with Myles Garrett a lot at the time. But I basically just DM'd him that kind of out of the blue. And like, I'm sure he probably forgot about it. We've never really talked about it, but like what he was doing with the NFL at the time was like really my end goal. Like that's all I wanted to do was like work for a team or work for a league, like just making cool videos. And it really inspired me to like really take this stuff seriously because I saw him doing it as a career. And he was really one of the original kind of guys in the sports social world, kind of along with like Ben Wardski and a lot of like Joe Gemmas and kind of those guys. But he was one of the first people doing it. And it really kind of showed me like, oh, this isn't just something like that's a hobby, like, oh, go film a football game. Like you can do this for a career. And he really inspired me in that way. and he's given me a lot of advice just kind of over the years. Funny enough, like the first advice I asked him for after I actually knew the guy, like after we had worked together for a season, was when I was kind of teetering, trying to figure out if I wanted to drop out of college or not. And like I remember I called him like, and I was like just asking like, what do you think I should do? Because he graduated from college and then took a job with Ohio State full time. And he was like, dude, I really don't think you should like leave school, because if you want to work, like especially for a university, like they're gonna want you to have a degree. And like at the time I was really, really conflicted, like should I drop out of school or not? And that just really added to it. But funny enough, like the first advice I really like asked him for as a friend, like I just blatantly didn't listen to, because like 2 weeks later I was packing up my dorm. So it just did not happen. But funny enough, then this fall, he reached back out because they had a job opening with Learfield, which is where he works at Ohio State, and basically like working just alongside him because they have so much NIL stuff. He can't keep up with it at Ohio State. They've just built an absolute machine of
monster, dude.
Crazy. That's a whole world.
Now, is that all in-house that does that, or is that his agency that's
So
doing like
he
the
works
NIL
in-house.
stuff? Okay.
So Learfield technically like works in-house at Ohio State Athletics.
Gotcha.
So he gets paid by Learfield, but he works for Ohio State really. So he called me and he's like, hey, like you should apply to this job. Like I think you'd get it because I'm the one kind of doing the hiring for it. And like then I was conflicted more so like, okay, do I abandon this thing that I'm building with my business, or do I, say no? Because honestly, like Ohio State would have been like my dream job if you asked me. Like the only full-time job I'd consider would be a job at Ohio State. And I thought about it for a really long time. Him and I had a lot of conversations on the phone about it. And ultimately I decided to just stick with what I was doing and kind of see where it goes. And honestly, I think I made the right choice, but there's a lot of days like I just wish I didn't have the stress of like owning a business. Like I could just go clock in, clock out, get my paycheck. But yeah, that was a really stressful time. And then what made me laugh is after we got off the phone, like the last time, whenever I told him I wasn't going to take the job, he kind of made a joke about like, oh, I kind of thought you were like overqualified for it anyway. Like keep doing what you're doing. And it made me laugh like on the phone, because all I could think of was that conversation where he was like, don't drop out of college. Like you're not going to be able to get a job in college athletics if you do. And
now look at you.
Like a year, like a little bit over a year later, he's like, yeah, I think you were overqualified for this job, which is just, I don't know. I hate being like super full of myself, but that was one of those moments where I'm like, okay, like maybe we are doing something like that's worth something, and I'm not just wasting my time making videos.
Yeah, you're doing something right, and then you hear it from him. I can do whatever the heck I want now at this point, as long as you just keep
something like that.
Yeah.
What would you say has been like the biggest obstacle you faced so far?
Comparison, for sure. Yeah.
Comparison is the thief of all joy.
Yeah, I think we talked about that at the event last Saturday, but yeah, just comparison, because I'm not the best editor. I'm not the best cinematographer. Like I can give you a list of 20 people better than me at really anything. But what I've found is like surrounding yourself with people that are really good at what they do, whenever you make a team out of it, and I found a knack for putting the right people together. Whenever you can do that and do that well, you really get some awesome pieces out of it. Nothing that like I could do on my own. It's really just a combination of God putting the right opportunities in front of me, and then me being able to find the right people to help with that and make the content really, really cool.
Doing it with the team, I think, is a lot more fun too, as well.
That too. Yeah, it'd get really, really lonely quick for me, because I live alone, and like if I was just like doing it all on my own, I'd probably turn into a little hermit really quick.
No, it's a grind. I mean, even like you brought up earlier, just like talking. I remember me and you just have conversations about like, I don't know, should I just do this keep doing this, or I could go and get a job whenever.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel
it's
like
tough.
we both have had like very similar predicaments that you had with the same scenarios, because Alex had a detailing business he did during college, and he was kind of at a crossroads where it was like, do I try to do this full time, or do I get a job and then maybe come back to this, or
Yeah.
you know what? So he had that decision, and then I had the same issue with you where it was like, should I look for a full-time athletic gig because I knew I wanted to work in sports, or should I like keep doing what I'm doing and see what happens? And we both went the same route of just keep doing it and see what happens.
Yeah.
Here we are. So
There we go.
Yeah.
pretty sweet. So are you a Sony guy or a Canon guy?
I'm a Sony guy.
Why?
For sure. I started on Canon. The camera I bought during COVID, I say I started on Canon. It was a Canon M50, which is like
Hey, that counts.
marketed as like a vlog camera. It's like probably the smallest DSLR shaped camera ever made. It's hilarious. Like it fits, like you can hold it with like 2 fingers. It's ridiculous. And then I think it was honestly just like everybody that I looked up to at the time, they all shot Sony. So I was like, okay, well, I guess Sony is just kind of the thing. And I bought my Sony in 2020, the end of 2021. And I think that was still while they were a little bit ahead of Canon. I feel like now, even with like Nikon, it's really hard to go wrong. Like it's really impossible to go wrong. If you're good at what you do, like it's going to show. I mean, my business partner, Cole, he shoots Canon, I shoot Sony. And like, it's never been a difference in quality that you can see.
Yeah, they're all really pretty comparable at this point. We've kind of I don't want to say plateaued, but in the last couple of years, I feel like we've kind of gotten to where I don't really know much else that they can add at this point. There's little things,
Right.
of course, but Sony is like it seems to be the videographer's choice for like sports, at least.
Yeah, I think photographers all pick Canon.
Yeah.
Or not all. I think a lot of AP shooters are shooting Sony now.
You see more that are shooting Sony, but it's and then you see some that shoot Nikon. So yeah, I mean, everybody has their preference, and honestly, a lot of it's probably too like, what system do you know the most? Because like once you get like really comfortable with it, you don't want to have to like switch up and learn a whole new thing.
Yeah,
But
or what do
Sony
you have
just
the most money
is-
in glass?
No, that too. That's the other big obstacle. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. As an absolute novice who doesn't know anything about either of the two,
Yeah,
what do you look at and like what makes a camera a great camera, in your opinions?
Well, there's a bunch of different factors. I feel like for sports, like what we do, like a big thing for me, especially early on, was like I wanted to do like the cool slow motion stuff. So
120.
I started with the Panasonic Lumix GH5 when I was here at Westminster, and that was big because I could do like 1080p, 120 frames per second, which was like that cool, like pretty slow motion. And then it could also do 4K 60, so like I could do a little bit of slow motion, but also like higher quality. So frame rate capabilities are probably big ones. Autofocus for some people, that's probably a little bit more relevant on the photography side, but I still use autofocus most of the time as well. So I know some people don't like that, but whatever.
yeah. At this point, I feel like it's just a personal preference.
Yeah,
You know,
and then
5
colors
years
and
ago-
tones. Some people say Sony has like a certain look to it, and Canon has a look to it, more red, or I forget what they
I
say.
think it's
Canon.
more magenta and
more
Canon
magenta.
colors.
Yeah.
But again, like if you really want it to look that way, like you can do that in the color grade.
Right.
Gotcha.
Like, yeah,
What's the difference in lenses?
Lenses.
What makes a lens good?
I feel like
whichever
Canon
one
has
you bought first.
yeah, basically.
Canon's glass, I
Whatever
think,
works.
is better for sure.
Yeah,
But
Canon has
Sony-
more of it too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been doing it a lot longer, at a high level. I mean, you can buy a 20-year-old Canon lens and it's still gonna look really, really good.
It's money.
Sony, you kind of not so much anymore now that they have that version 2 of all their mirrorless glass. But at least like while I was buying a lot of my glass, like you basically had to buy it new, which is a big like barrier to entry.
It's
just
expensive.
because it's a lot more expensive to buy something new than used. So that's honestly probably the biggest lens difference. Like there's minor like sharpness things, but honestly, like if you ask someone that shoots Sony, they'll say that Sony glass is sharper, and if you ask someone that shoots Canon, they'll say Canon glass is sharper.
That makes sense. If there's somebody new wants to get into anything photography, videography, what's your go-to recommendation to start with, camera-wise?
At this point, I
Camera
feel
lens
like
combo.
I feel like an A7 III with a 24 to 70, like an older Sigma 24 to 70.
Yeah.
would probably be the ticket, because you can get those A7 IIIs for ridiculous cheap now.
Yeah, they're pretty affordable now, and you can still do like really good content with
Yeah.
it. And it doesn't specialize really, so it's good at photos and it's good at video. So you can kind of play with both and figure out what your strong suit is or what you like most. Yeah, A7 III or A7 IV probably is the go-to for most people.
Now, is that Sony or is that Canon?
That's Sony.
Sony.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Canon.
I don't know enough
Like
about
a-
Canon. I don't to give a
Yeah,
recommendation.
whenever I was shopping, it was an EOS R, but honestly, I couldn't give a good recommendation 5 years later.
Yeah.
EOS 7.
All right, I got one closing question for you. What piece of advice would you give to another 18-year-old kid who's in the same predicament, is getting pulled in the direction of maybe doing their own business, going this route, but doesn't know if they want to do college or something like that? What would you give? What advice would you give them?
If you don't need a college degree, I would drop out, to be honest. Like, if you don't need a college degree and you have a plan, don't just drop out to drop out. But if you have a plan and you think it might work and you're going into a field that doesn't require a college degree, obviously, if you're trying to be a doctor, it's not the best idea to start your own practice freelance. But, you know,
Fair,
if you're going into something, you know, if you have a product that you want to sell, like, you can always go back to college if it doesn't work out. You know, you might feel like you're behind a couple years, but who cares? It's your life.
Love it. It's a great way to look at it. Well, we appreciate you coming out to visit us here in New Wilmington. I know it was a little bit of a drive, but it was a great conversation, and we love what you're doing with your business and all of your sports content. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. It was great.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Peace.
See you guys.
Peace out.